So this is what our final piece is going to look like. We're going to have some watercolour flames, some fun mandala inspired circles, and just a bit of a mixed watercolour piece at the end there. To start out, we're going to need our watercolour paper, our paper towel, some watercolours, some pens, a paintbrush, water, and some washi tape. I'm going to use my washi tape to divide my artwork into sections. If you like to do 3 separate artworks, that's totally okay. This week we won't be applying a wet gloss to the background, as we're not doing an entire background, we're just focusing on small sections of watercolour. So this will be a wet on dry approach. I'm going to start out by using some pinky red and drawing the shape of a teardrop, which is going to be the base of our flame. Whenever there's a little bit too much water and the paint is pooling in one section, I use a paper towel to dab some of that away. I'm then putting the yellow far away, making sure not to blend it at first. Then once I've applied the yellow to the areas I want, I'm going to blend it in, adding a little bit more red to bring out the boldness of the flame. As you'll notice, I'm doing both the sections at the same time because I want them to blend in a little. This is what it should look like now. Moving on to the next section, I'm simply going to paint 3 big circles. You can use any colour you like. And again, I'll be using some paper towel to dab away some of the colour as it's quite wet. Our 3 circles are here. Moving on to the third section, it's worth noting that I've changed my water over again. This section is going to be a bit more of a mixed watercolour piece where I don't really know what it's going to end up looking like, but I'm starting just by mixing 3 colours together, allowing it to be quite watery and letting the water run over the top of each other. Again, dabbing off any extra parts that make it too watery. This is what the third section looks like. In order to make these artworks come to life, I've decided to add some ink. With the bottom section, you could simply write a quote over the top like this, or we could move on to our patterns. These sorts of patterns could be found anywhere online, or you might find them on a t-shirt or a dress at home. Use anything for inspiration. This is a card that my friend sent to me. It looks really good, and as you can see, the patterns are actually very simple. Lines, diamonds, flowers, and triangles and circles are used a lot. White can also look really good over the top of watercolour, so we're going to do a bit of a mix of experimenting with these things today. But first, I have to wait for my watercolour to dry. If I don't wait for my watercolour to dry and I start using pen on the top, the ink from the pen will bleed into the artwork. I'm just going to show you a demonstration of how some simple shapes can really make an awesome pattern picture. Starting off with a circle, then adding triangles to the outside, adding a swirl in the middle, and some dots and some triangles can make a really cool effect. Yes, my artworks are dry. I can now begin the process of adding the ink. I'm going to start out with the fire. I've decided that I want to keep all of my drawings within the coloured space. So I'm doing a small teardrop shape in the middle so that I don't go outside of the flame. Just making up some patterns that come to my mind, but if you get stuck, you could also use a picture for inspiration like I've got here. And there's our fire, and there are our flames. Moving on to the circles. I'm going to start with the yellow one and do a simple sun-like shape. I'm actually going to go outside of the borders with this yellow one just to get a different effect. Moving on to the green one, I'm starting with a flower-like picture in the middle and then going around just adding different paint, adding different designs. And then finally, I'm moving on to more of a seashell type picture with some petals around the outside. I'm really happy with these. Now moving on to our interesting blob. I've decided to experiment with a white pen for this one, and I'm just following some of the different paint colours and drawing some swirls. Now I've decided to make some of the swirls bigger and emphasize them. I'm also going to experiment with putting some black on the outside. This process can take a long time depending on how detailed you like to be. You can make it simple or complex. It's totally up to you. And there we have it. The third piece of watercolour has been covered with ink. Now comes the exciting part, taking off the washi tape. And here we have our final artworks. Watercolour with ink on top.